Starting now, for at least the next 14 chapters, all hell is breaking loose. The battle intensifies, the fighters are becoming more brutal and desperate, Zeus prepares to fulfill his promise to Thetis, and Hector begins a startling transformation. Hello and welcome, or welcome back. Today, as always, we will be reading the great books of Western civilization, starting with the Iliad. This is Book 8. I'm using the Robert Fagles translation. We will begin with a short synopsis and then go into analysis and commentary. Zeus calls for an assembly among the gods early the next morning. He announces that from this moment on, all gods and goddesses are forbidden from participating or interfering in the events of the Trojan War. He goes on to threaten to strike them with his lightning or imprison them in Tartarus should they disobey. All of the gods are dumbstruck and terrified. After reassuring his daughter Athena that he means her no harm, Zeus departs to his throne on the top of Mount Gargaron, from which he can see the entirety of Troy and the battlefield. As the two armies begin to fight, Zeus holds up his golden scales and puts in them the fates of death for both the Trojans and the Greeks. The scales indicate that today is a day of doom for the Greeks, and so Zeus acts accordingly. He looses thunder and lightning across the battlefield, emboldening the Trojans, terrifying the Greeks, and nearly destroying Diomedes' chariot. Hector believes that this thunder is a sign that Zeus has in fact bowed his head to give him glory and slaughter for the Greeks. He leads the Trojans forward in a great charge as the Greek forces retreat behind their wall. Agamemnon cries aloud in anguish, wondering why this is happening when he's always been so faithful to Zeus, and he begs that not all the men might be killed. Zeus is merciful and assents to this with a bow of his head. Hera is also appalled at this turn of events and tries to convince one of the gods or goddesses to help her stop the Trojans. Poseidon refuses on account of not wanting to get zapped by lightning. Athena, however, believes that she has been slighted by Zeus and so agrees to help Hera. The two goddesses prepare for battle, and as they begin their descent, Zeus spots them and sends Iris, the messenger goddess, to repeat his threat to them. At this message, Hera relents, telling Athena that they should not risk such pain for the sake of mortal men. Night falls, stopping the fighting for the day, a relief to the Greek forces. Hector orders his army to camp not inside the city, as usual, but instead out on the field, keeping the pressure on the Greeks and preventing them from either escaping in the night or from taking back their lost ground. Their many campfires serve as a stark reminder of the slaughter awaiting the Greeks in the morning. Zeus has set the stage now, and is prepared to fulfill his promise to both Thetis and Achilles, but he has to make sure that the gods don't screw it up. He goes out of his way to remind the gods just how much more powerful he is than them, emphasizing that if all of them were even to pull on a great cable, all of them on one side and him on the other, he would still win. And yet, despite this power, he still has to order them not to interfere to make sure that his will is done. He might be powerful, but he's not all-powerful. And then later, we see him use a set of scales to determine whose fate it is to die today, once again hinting that fate is something that is above the gods, and something that they have to abide by, soon or late, even if it's against their will. And as usual, Zeus is the foremost enforcer of this fate. Zeus, however, does not often share his plans with the other gods of how he intends to fulfill his promises or bring about the will of fate. So he often ends up butting heads with them because they don't know what he's doing. He reassures Athena after his pronouncement that he means her no harm here. "Courage, Athena, third born of the gods, dear child. Nothing I said was meant in earnest. Trust me, I mean you all the goodwill in the world." Despite this, Athena tells Hera in their conversation that she believes that Zeus hates her. She gives us her reasoning. "Zeus hates me now. He fulfills the plans of Thetis, who cupped his chin in her hand and kissed his knees. But the day will come when father, well I know, calls me his darling gray-eyed girl again." She has conflated Zeus fulfilling Thetis' will to the exclusion of her own will as hating her and being a rejection of her, herself. This is why she doesn't believe his reassurance and why she goes ahead and disobeys him. I think this is right in character for a god or goddess, to think that them being denied their will or someone not wanting to give them their will is equal to being hated by that person. As I've mentioned, the gods are very self-centered. Speaking of that, Hera says something very interesting after Zeus sends his message to them. I cannot let us battle the Father any longer, not for mortal men. For what, then? Isn't that what this has all been about? If you're not going to suffer for mortal men, what else do you have to suffer for? What is more important to the gods than not being in pain or giving up pleasure? The answer is nothing. Nothing changes with the gods. They lose little and gain little, no matter what's going on Earth. If they so chose, they could be completely ignorant and uninvolved in human affairs. For the most part, Hades, the god of the underworld, does this himself. And when the gods are involved, they seem to participate for their own pleasure only. Yes, to enforce fate as well, but again, that's not really a concern so much as an obligation, and a loose one at that. This is why glory is so important. The gods have it. They have their glory. They don't really earn any more or lose it. They're gods. As Zeus says, only a minor god would be all that worried about losing glory because men don't praise them. Meanwhile, men's lives are what they are. They live and then they die to go to the underworld and live in a stupor in which they're unaware of who or what they are. This life is all they have, and the glory that they win in it very well might be the only thing that outlasts them. Speaking of glory now, everybody agrees that Zeus is giving Hector glory today. However, Hector makes a huge assumption, and the moment he does so, a transformation in him begins. The Father nods his head in assent, I see. At last he grants me glory, triumph, the Argives, bloody death. A couple layers here. Obviously, Homer is always very clear when Zeus is or is not bowing his head. He either shows it to us in person, as he did in this chapter when Agamemnon begged for mercy for the troops, or when he granted Thetis' request, and this hasn't been seen in person because it happened 10 years before the beginning of the story, but he did promise that Troy will fall to Agamemnon. So that makes 3 confirmed unbreakable promises so far. This here, giving Hector glory in and of itself and giving him triumph over the Greeks, that didn't happen. That's not one of them. If Hector saw anything, then it wasn't the bow of the head to him, but to Achilles. We already know that Zeus is only giving Hector triumph and what glory there is to be gained for the sake of punishing Agamemnon and restoring the glory of Achilles. Hector is half right, though. He is, in punishing the Greeks, acting in accordance with the will of Zeus. However, the will of Zeus, right now, enforces the will of Achilles. So, Hector's will is, in many ways, right now, the same as the will of Achilles. Hector is punishing Agamemnon as the will of Achilles. It was pointed out to me in a course long ago that it is now, therefore, that Hector begins to take on some of Achilles' characteristics. He's described as bent on glory in several instances in this chapter and others to come, and he's also described as being godlike in several instances. So what we're really watching here, and what we'll continue to watch, is Achilles taking revenge on Agamemnon in every sense of the word, just a hair short of literally doing it himself. This is not the only transformation in character that we'll see in this epic, and this transformation itself will continue as we keep reading. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you see here, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified whenever I post a new video. If you learned something new today or something that was especially interesting to you, please comment below and let me know what it was. See you next time.